Recently, the comedy world has been embroiled in a controversy that has shaken it to its very foundations. I am, of course, talking about the Riyadh Comedy Festival. If you don't know what that is, well, I'm not entirely sure how you got to this channel. Nevertheless, the Riyadh Comedy Festival was an event that took place from September 26th to October 9th in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and featured many of the world's most popular and influential comedians. The event has garnered widespread condemnation due to Saudi Arabia's litany of human rights abuses and the fact that the festival was directly funded by the Saudi regime. This fact is important to remember for later, as it will directly counter the excuses made by many comedians who took part in this event. Now, I'm going to treat you like an adult and assume that you either have a passing understanding of the human rights abuses that take place in Saudi Arabia, or are capable of Googling them. It's not a great place, and in particular, not a place you would expect the supposed vanguard of free speech that are stand-up comics to visit. Especially because this event was a blatant attempt, in a long list of them, to whitewash the reputation of Saudi Arabia, which is why there has been such a ferocious backlash to so many comedians participating in this event. Whatever they may say, they have lent their names and reputations to a propaganda effort by the Saudi government, which is why I've wanted to make this documentary. I understand how shameless and hypocritical comedians are, and I know that invariably almost all of them will criticize someone else for doing exactly what they did. That can't be countenanced. These are people who make a living from proffering their opinions and insights. Largely these days, it's in the form of barely comedic podcasts where they bloviate about real-life social and political issues. Some of them have even directly platformed major political figures of our time and may have played a role in getting them elected. This Riyadh Comedy Festival situation is such a glaring black mark on their moral character, and frankly just their judgment, that they shouldn't ever be allowed to open any of their stupid mouths about any social issue without being reminded of it. While that is unrealistic, we can make sure that their inevitable backsliding and hypocrisy will be immortalized in some way forever. With that said, I would like to make a point or two before getting into the lies, deflections, reframings, whataboutisms, and revisionist history. The first thing I want to say is that I don't really care about any of this. I'm not upset or disappointed that any of these people went to Saudi Arabia to take part in a propaganda effort. I never expected better from any of these shills and grifters to begin with, so it's hard for them to let me down. There are some individuals like Hannibal Buress, Dave Chappelle, or Whitney Cummings where the hypocrisy is especially glaring, but it's not exactly beyond the pale. Comedians are some of the most craven and shameless people on earth. There is no low that most of them wouldn't stoop to. Take Kevin Hart, for example. Given every project he's quote-unquote acted in, and every product he's happily advertised, do you think there is anything too embarrassing or unethical for him to put his name on? I don't.
I'm not here to play games. I'm not, unless that game is Royal Kingdom.
He'd probably be willing to shill Diddy brand baby oil if the check had enough zeros on it.
Open him up! Oh, open him up!
And while on the subject of associates of sex traffickers,
you knew Jeffrey Epstein, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Does it seem like Chris Tucker would really have a problem working for the Saudis given some of his prior acquaintances?
What's up, Saudi Arabia? Riyadh, I'm on my way. Your boy Chris Tucker is on his way. I'll see you soon. Riyadh!
I'm sure he's worked tougher rooms than that. Where do you think the Riyadh Comedy Festival ranks between Little St. James and the Lolita Express? These are the kinds of people we're talking about here. But even if we take a step down from the level of literal friends of Diddy and Jeffrey Epstein, there are still layers upon layers of shameless greed and moral turpitude that we can go through. I'm talking about people like Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr, Gabriel Iglesias, Joe Coy, Sebastian Maniscalco, Louis C.K., Russell Peters, and the like. These are people who clearly didn't need to do it. They're already famous, successful, and rich. I could understand making this sort of moral compromise if you were in a bad spot financially, and the Saudis came to you with an amount of money that would solve all of your problems. That's not what's going on here. These people are just sellouts who are willing to sacrifice their morality in exchange for more money. Well, that is assuming they had any morals or values to begin with. Of course, I can't talk about everyone who took part in this event, because there were about 50 people who took the Saudi blood money. Additionally, a lot of them have, wisely, not spoken on the matter much, if at all. I think the group hit the hardest by the backlash have been the comedians a step or two down from the A-list. With a few exceptions, I'm talking about the comedian/podcaster class. When I first started doing research into this topic, I debated exactly how I wanted to convey this information. Eventually, I settled on discussing the various comments and responses made by comedians in a roughly descending order from least ridiculous and sociopathic to most. As I said before, there are many comedians who haven't addressed this situation. There have also been a few like Tom Segura or Bobby Lee and Andrew Santino who have acknowledged being there, but said little else about it. Segura has only praised the Saudi audience for getting his jokes, and said that he had a great time in the country, at least as of writing. Also, a running theme here will be that nobody has a bad word to say about Saudi Arabia while they are there. Curious. This general trepidation seems apparent when watching the episode of We Might Be Drunk featuring Jessica Kirson, which will be my next step down this ladder of moral degradation. Chapter 1. Normand, Morril, and Kirson. Compared to some of the comments we'll get to later, this discussion is fairly mild, which is why I'm putting it so early in the list. That said, there is a noticeably awkward tone to the conversation, with the hosts seeming to tiptoe into announcing that they're going to perform in Saudi Arabia.
It's kind of like the Middle East. There's not a lot of ha-ha going on down in Libya. You never hear about the Libyan chuckle hunt, Although I think it's changing.
Although we did get an offer to play.
I think I'm going to go.
You're going to go?
Well, I'm only doing 2 days.
Personally, I think they understood that this decision was going to be controversial, and were trying to soften the blow to their audience. Normand says he's just getting in and out quick for the money, and Kirson agrees that she would do the same.
I'm only doing 2 days.
Where?
I'm going in and out.
Saudi Arabia.
Just forget that
I would do
paycheck.
Yeah.
Why
I'm
not?
doing it. 2 days.
Now, I don't know exactly when this podcast was recorded, but it seems to have been put on Patreon on July 31st and YouTube on August 3rd. The festival was announced on July 25th, and by July 29th, a preliminary lineup was announced that listed Normand, Morril, and Kirson. So, either this was recorded before the 29th, or Sam and Jessica were playing dumb in an attempt to soft reveal the news to their audiences. Kirson's participation in the event is particularly noteworthy to me because she is a gay Jewish woman, or as Sam put it, she's got 3.
I mean, you got 2. I just got 1. You got 3.
3 kids?
No, gay, woman, and Jew.
Oh.
Interestingly, during the discussion of performing comedy in Saudi Arabia, Kirson said she wouldn't do any gay material over there.
I wouldn't do gay material there.
Yeah.
At all.
Weird.
No.
This is odd to me because she would say after the fact that she only agreed to take part in the festival after requesting a guarantee that she could be openly out as a lesbian on stage and perform gay material, which she apparently did. To me, this is why the date the podcast was recorded is kind of important, at least for Kirson. If she was already part of the lineup at this point, then she was just lying on the podcast for some reason. If she wasn't, then she changed her position as soon as she got an offer.
You guys nervous to go there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In some ways, this does align with the statement she released to The Hollywood Reporter, after she performed in Saudi Arabia, of course. In the statement, she would say that the decision to perform in Saudi Arabia, at the behest of a government that continues to violate fundamental human rights, has weighed heavily on her heart since. She then went on to explain that her decision was influenced by the desire to break down cultural barriers. Quote, I hope that this could help LGBTQ+ people in Saudi Arabia feel seen and valued. I am grateful that I was able to do precisely that. To my knowledge, I am the first openly gay comic to talk about it on stage in Saudi Arabia. I received messages from attendees sharing how much it meant to them to participate in a gay-affirming event. At the same time, I deeply regret participating under the auspices of the Saudi government. I have donated the entirety of what I was paid to perform there to a human rights organization. I made this decision because I want that money to go to an organization that can help combat these severe issues. End quote. She followed this up by saying that she respected her fellow comics that criticized the event and hoped that this moment sparks dialogue about how we can use our platforms for good, to support people without a voice and to find ways to be less divided. As previously stated, she also said that she had donated the proceeds from the event to a human rights organization. Which one? Who knows? Finally, she apologized to her fans, saying, quote, I see you, I hear you, your voice matters to me. I love you all, and I am genuinely sorry for making a poor decision that had repercussions I didn't fully consider. End quote. I see you, I hear you. Who does she think she is, fucking Kamala Harris? Strange how you didn't see or hear your fans for the 2 months before performing for a regime that would probably imprison them. But I'm guessing it was pretty hard to see around all those dollar signs, huh? Aside from the contradictory nature of Kirson's statement, as well as the highly suspicious number of M-dashes, her excuse is one of the most believable to me, even if I don't really buy it. I'm sure that there was a certain allure to the idea of being potentially the first openly gay comedian to perform in a repressive country like Saudi Arabia. Even if you knew you would be performing for the regime itself, the thought had to be very tempting. You could easily get caught up in thinking that this was an accomplishment that you could metaphorically put on your mantle, like Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier but for hacked comics. Then, when they agree to your terms about being able to perform as an openly gay person and offer you a huge paycheck, it probably becomes very difficult to turn down. But the truth is, the Saudis played Kirson like a fiddle, as they did with most of the other comedians. She was a pawn. The Saudis were probably more than happy to meet her requests, because having an openly gay comic perform at the festival only advances their propaganda goal of making the country seem more tolerant and progressive. Beyond that, it's important to note that the three of them, Normand, Morril, and Kirson, all understood beforehand that Saudi Arabia was a country where human rights abuses are commonplace.
You guys nervous to go there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You got 3.
3 kids?
No, gay, woman, and Jew.
Oh, yeah.
I just got Jew.
I wouldn't do gay material there.
Yeah.
At all.
Weird.
They see this, they're like, kidnap him.
Yeah.
Kidnap him
They
for that
have
clip.
comedy.
And this wasn't even the only time that Normand and Morril did this. In a podcast episode featuring Whitney Cummings, who also performed at the festival, they would again tacitly acknowledge the repressive nature of Saudi Arabia.
I think if you're a woman working in Saudi Arabia, it's so deeply unfair that I will be forced to work when I'm there.
You won't have to drive.
Yeah, I was going to say, at least they'll have a driver for me.
Yeah.
The reason this fact is important to keep in mind is because we can't lose sight of the fact that all of the people involved in this debacle knew what they were getting into. They joked about it because they are comedians, allegedly, but they understood what Saudi Arabia was like when they agreed to go over there. Another great example of this would be Chris Distefano's comments on the festival. Chapter 2. Chris Distefano. Distefano's perspective on the Riyadh gig is interesting to me because he gave 2 conflicting accounts of his decision to perform on 2 different podcasts. The first came on an episode of 2 Bears 1 Cave from July 21st that he was guest hosting with the $40,000 chocolate fraudster Stavros Halkias. During a riff about life insurance, Chris throws in that he's got a gig in Saudi Arabia.
He's a comedian, he's got a show in Saudi Arabia, and his cholesterol's 400.
When Stav asks if he's going, Chris then flips it back and asks Stav if he's doing the gig,
Hey, you going to Saudi Arabia? Are you going to do that gig?
to which Stav says that he can't.
I can't.
Can't do it, can't take the Saudi money.
Can't do it,
I get it.
man. I can't.
This is another theme you will see from several of the comedians when they bring up the festival. The way they try to find a back door into talking about it, and then spin the issue around to their interlocutor. This isn't even the only time Chris specifically does it either, but I'll get to that in a minute. While riffing about Saudi Arabia with Stav, Chris essentially blames his wife for making him take the festival gig for the money.
I didn't want to do it either. I was contemplating. I was like, maybe not. I was like, I can't do it. And then she was like, you're going to take that fucking money.
Yeah.
However, shortly after this, Chris makes it clear that he understands the retrograde nature of the country by saying that his wife cannot go with him to the gig.
There's no question Jasmine can't come.
Chris continues to prove that he comprehends how brutal the country is by making jokes about how his wife would come back from Saudi Arabia headless.
If you do come, just know you're coming back headless.
Yeah.
And suggests that he would join in on stoning Jewish comedians if it meant getting back home safely.
I was like, I'm going to grab a stone too. I'm going to join the mob and get out of there. I got to get home.
You're all we're gonna stone Sam.
Yeah.
Like I said during the We Might Be Drunk segment, these are jokes, but they also leave no room for the excuse that comedians like Distefano weren't aware of what was going on in Saudi Arabia.
Jessica Kirson's getting it first, right? What the hell?
He's not leaving, I'll tell you that. It's going to be hard to do crowd work with that burqa.
Everyone.
They know they were just willing to look the other way in exchange for a big enough payday. He does try to muddy the waters by comparing the controversy regarding the Saudis to the exhaustion felt over donating to charities that turn out to be scams.
And then you just get exhausted and you're like, I don't know anymore at all.
But again, it's little more than muddying the waters and deflection. And it's not as if Chris couldn't turn the gig down, because the Dionysian bag of Euro meat sitting right next to him did just that. But it gets worse for Lil Chrissy D. During an episode of his History Hyenas podcast from August 14th, he brought up the Riyadh Comedy Festival to Joe DeRosa. And again, watch how he injects the topic into the conversation as if he can't wait to get it off his chest.
Sure, we need to be
gotta
for the
carve
next
that out.
2 months. I got a show in Saudi Arabia, so I don't want any clips to pop up at the airport.
Wait, do you really?
Swear to God.
Oh,
Like,
God, dude, that sounds
awful.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
What I find really telling about this bit is the way that Chris once again spins the conversation around, this time on Joe DeRosa, and asks him whether or not he would go.
You wouldn't go?
Dude, you're...
It seems to me like he has a guilty conscience about his decision and is hoping for confirmation from one of his peers. It's like he wants Joe to admit that he would have done the same thing.
No,
You haven't good. You know.
You wouldn't do it.
You know the way you talk.
But DeRosa rebukes him. Even after Joe says he wouldn't go to Saudi Arabia, Chris continues to pressure him on the issue and question if DeRosa would do it for the right number.
For the right number, you wouldn't do it?
dude, that's like saying...
Joe provides a rambling response about how going to Saudi Arabia would be like going through a bad neighborhood to get to a good restaurant, then expresses a reluctance to visit the Middle East in general.
I would not feel comfortable going to that region of the world, personally.
Right now.
No.
Later on, Chris seems to contradict his claim from Two Bears, One Cave that his wife pressured him into taking the gig, when he says that his family is pretty upset about him going.
My family is pretty upset that I said yes.
Well, there's a reason.
After talking about how his Puerto Rican material probably won't go over well in Saudi Arabia, he stumbles through pronouncing Riyadh,
Riyadh?
then claims that all of the big comedians will be doing the festival.
It's a huge, Kevin Hart's going, Tom Segura.
This is another tactic you'll see used by comedians to justify doing the gig. Well, all of the other comedians are doing it.
People are doing it like a lot, like almost everyone.
It's Louis C.K., me, Bill Burr, Fluffy's going, Whitney Cummings is going, Aziz Ansari, Bill Burr, Jefferies, Jimmy Carr, Joe Coy, Kevin Hart, you know.
It's the kind of excuse that doesn't hold water when a child uses it. But it's especially lame when it's coming from fully grown adults taking a shot at their own reputation like it's a Saudi journalist in a consulate building in Istanbul.
You're going to a country that looks good on the surface, but there's a lot of horrible things happening in that country to make it look a certain way on the surface, right?
Right.
It doesn't quite end here, though. After arriving in Saudi Arabia, Chris took part in what I can only describe as a humiliation ritual. While looking like he was being held at gunpoint, Chris extolled the virtues of the country and said that he was already thinking about moving there, despite only having been in the country for 10 hours. I'm not a fan of Chris Distefano, but I'm not sure how you could watch this video and not have your estimation of him as a man fucking plummet. And he's far from the only one doing this shit. It seems like most of the comedians who were involved in the festival either had to praise the country or take part in bizarre rituals. Even the A-listers like Kevin Hart and Dave Chappelle were doing weird sand handprints. Moreover, in the time since doing the Saudi gig, Chris has made repeated remarks about it. They are typically minor but feel forced into conversations, as if Chris cannot get the subject out of the back of his mind.
I always get a little nervous when...
Yeah, about when you go to Saudi Arabia?
Perhaps because he knows he will always be tied to this controversy in some way.
And it's one of those things where, you know, as you said, it gets very expensive for any of the people who were criticizing me for going to Saudi Arabia. I have 3 words for you: Brooklyn Family Court.
It's another reason why getting involved in this event was a terrible idea. It was never just going to be collecting a paycheck. These people are forever going to be part of an effort to launder the reputation of the Saudi government via their own reputations.
And the guy goes, just hold these flowers and take a photo in front of the sign. And I was like, okay. which felt very weird. But he's like, Bobby Lee did it, Santino did it. I was like, all right, as long as everyone else did it, because you don't want to be the guy going Riyadh. Here's me with flowers. I don't want to be the face of Riyadh.
Sure.
This will happen regardless of any regrets they have or attempts they've made to recontextualize their role in the festival, such as with Aziz Ansari. Chapter 3. Aziz Ansari. Aziz is sort of an odd figure in the story to me. As far as I can tell, he didn't provide any preemptive explanations or justifications for taking part in this event, as many other comics did. Perhaps he was just excited to visit a country where he could freely give women the claw. Who knows? On the other hand, he's one of the few comedians who has actually been publicly questioned about performing at the Riyadh Comedy Festival. In a rare moment of journalistic integrity, Jimmy Kimmel took a break from weeping on network television to grill Ansari on his decision to perform at the festival. Okay, grill might be an exaggeration, but he pressed Aziz harder than basically any of these comedians have been pressed on the issue. Kimmel would bring up the brutal nature of the Saudi regime and question why Aziz decided to perform for them.
It's a pretty brutal regime. They've done a lot of horrible, horrible things. And so people are questioning why you would go over there and take their money to perform in front of these people. And I'm just curious because you were there, you made this decision. I'm curious as to why you decided to do that.
Aziz's answer was an interesting one, as he argued that there were people in Saudi Arabia who didn't agree with the government, and it was unfair to paint them with the same brush.
There's people over there that don't agree with the stuff that the government's doing. And to ascribe the worst behavior of the government onto those people, it's not fair.
Curiously, this is a rather similar comment to one made by Russell Peters on the matter.
If you've never been here, you're going to picture something that's a very old picture of what this country once was. Yeah. And so it's really unfair that you get pigeonholed like that.
When pushed by Kimmel about Saudi Arabia murdering journalists,
arresting people for peaceful protest. I mean, I know, we're doing horrible things over here, but they murdered a journalist. I mean, it's like, these are not good people over there.
Ansari defended himself by saying that he was just there to perform for the people. Then he argued that an event like a comedy festival could potentially push the country in a direction that might open up a dialogue.
No, I was just there to do a show for the people, and things can really change. And to me, a comedy festival felt like something that's pushing things to be more open and to push a dialogue.
Now, this is a technique that we'll see several other comedians attempt to try to clean the blood off their hands. They'll either do some kind of whataboutism regarding the atrocities committed by another country.
You don't think our government's fucking bumped people? I think Jeffrey Epstein was fucking bumped off. Yeah.
Or argue that they were there to perform for the people and suggest that they were hoping to push the country in a more progressive direction with their comedy.
And I just think comedy is a great way to get in and start talking.
It's 27-year-old, 28-year-old kids who were wearing jeans and T-shirts, and they just wanted to see us, and we met the fans afterwards, and it was kind of a beautiful moment.
All of these are bad arguments for one simple reason. This festival was directly created and funded by the Saudi government as part of a massive effort to whitewash their image. If this had been a comedy show put on by an ordinary comedy club in Saudi Arabia to entertain average people, their comparisons might be fair, but it wasn't. A more reasonable comparison would be if they were asked to perform directly at the behest of Donald Trump's administration. But in that case, I am sure many of these comedians would easily understand the ethical quandary in that decision. Aziz would go on to add that before even going to Saudi Arabia, he spoke to his team and said that he thought a portion of the proceeds from the gig should go to charity, which got a pop from the audience.
And I said to myself and to my team, I said, hey, if we do this, part of the fee should go to support causes that support, free press and human rights. And
specifically, he cited Reporters Without Borders and Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch has since stated that they cannot take money from any of the comedians who performed at the Riyadh Comedy Festival due to ethical concerns. To paraphrase Human Rights Watch's head of Economic Justice and Rights Division, if they were to accept money from those comedians, it could create the perception that somehow they compromised their independence after the fact. He also added that as far as he knew, Human Rights Watch had not been contacted by nor received money from comedians involved in the festival. So, Jessica, what organization did you donate to again? But as I said earlier, Aziz is far from the only comedian to use these excuses about trying to push Saudi Arabia in a more progressive direction. Take, for example, Louis C.K. Chapter 4. Louis C.K. Like with Aziz, Louis only seems to have spoken about the event sparingly. The main example of which came during an interview with Bill Maher where he was promoting some novel he wrote. That said, Maher's line of questioning was far more softball than Kimmel's.
I basically think it's a great idea to go anywhere like that. I still think people who are doing it are brave, and it's apparently the ones over there are enjoying it.
He even suggested that it was okay for there to be restrictions on free speech because this was the first time such an event was taking place.
There are restrictions on what you can say because this is the first time.
Louis' justification for going was also more mealy-mouthed than Aziz's. He stated that he had mixed feelings about going.
I have mixed feelings about it too. I struggled about going once I started hearing what everyone was saying.
But he also talked about how positively those comedians were receiving the country and even cited Jessica Kirson.
There is a woman who's a lesbian and Jewish who did a show there, and she got a standing ovation.
I don't know, man. When your primary citation is a person who admits they sincerely regret their decision to take part in the event, maybe you're not making a great argument. Furthermore, Louis would say that he had always said no to Arab countries before.
When I got offers from places like that, there'd be a long list, and I just say, no, I don't need that.
But when he heard that there would only be 2 restrictions on what he could say, and they didn't really affect his act, he thought it was a good opportunity to use comedy to start a conversation.
But when I heard its opening, I thought, that's awfully interesting. That just feels like a good opportunity. And I just think comedy is a great way to get in and start talking. The fact that that's opening up and starting to bud, I want to see it. I want to be part of it.
Yeah, I'm sure that was the only reason. It definitely wasn't the money. You've been doing comedy for 40 years and you said no to Arab countries that entire time. Now, all of a sudden you're willing to do Saudi Arabia because, unlike that hotel door, the country is finally opening up. It's so transparent that it's embarrassing. To add another layer of hypocrisy to the mix, Louis once berated Shane Gillis for putting ads in his podcast and doing a Patreon show.
We're going to read some ads.
Okay.
All right. And then we're going to switch over to the Patreon for the last part. So join the Patreon if you want.
Why do you make them go on Patreon?
That way.
That way what?
It's good.
Do you need the money?
Louis repeatedly browbeat Gillis and questioned if he actually needed the money that badly.
Do you need the money?
Yes.
Really? The
No,
ads
I don't.
and the Patreon? You're going to make them listen to ads
Hold
and
on.
then switch to Patreon?
Hold on.
After demanding that Shane tell him how much he thought they'd make from Patreon, he then mocked Gillis by saying he'd pay Matt and Sean the money himself, if it meant keeping the podcast free.
Matt's got a family.
How much do you get for Patreon? How much really?
I'll tell you.
You tell me. How
Right
much
now?
do you think you'll make on this on Patreon?
If 1,000 people join the Patreon, it's $5 a month.
It's $5,000 a month. And then you
Times
think they
12.
just stay there.
And then, they like it.
But
'cause
you
it's
think
good.
1,000 people will join your Patreon? 5,000 new people because of this?
I wish you would stop this. Guys,
I will
support
pay
the greatest
him
history podcast.
$5,000 a month
Guys,
to keep this content free.
This could be the greatest history podcast of all time. And thank Christ, it's brought to you by Manscaped.
The irony of this situation, of course, is that Shane Gillis turned down the Riyadh Comedy Festival, despite them offering him a significant amount of money, while Louis sold his soul.
Yeah, there was it's tight. They just went to the desert and just fucking
They were
vibed
asking
out.
me to go to the Middle East soon. to their shows.
What? Where? Why?
Saudi Arabia and UAE or Dubai.
Dubai?
I think I'm gonna pass.
Yeah. For the troops? Is it for the troops?
Not for the troops. It's for the Saudis.
For the Saudi princes?
Yeah, and everyone's like, yeah, you should do it. Everyone's doing it. It's like, for Saudis?
Yeah.
Weren't those the 9/11 guys?
So I thought.
Aren't they exactly the 9/11 guys?
Reminds me of that tragedy.
Yeah, you don't 9/11 your friends, bro.
Don't 9/11 your friends.
You don't.
I don't laugh at 9/11 again.
I should have taken I got to take the Saudi Arabia deal. I should have taken it. I'm washed.
That is good. I admire that.
Then they doubled the bag, and I was like,
They doubled the bag, the princes?
it was a significant bag.
What?
But I'd already said no. You know, I took a principled stand.
Yeah, against Saudi Arabia.
It wasn't even that. I didn't even think
I
about it.
thought we were allies with
I didn't
Saudi
even really
Arabia.
think. Yeah, we are. We give them a ton of.
I guess somebody needed the money, huh, Lou? The situation is further complicated by the fact that Louis seemed to understand the reality of dictators and authoritarian regimes in the past, at least when it concerned people like Muammar Gaddafi or Osama bin Laden.
I'm a despot. What part of that do you not understand?
This is what it is.
I stay till I'm dead. When did this not start not happening?
And then my kid takes over. That's
Yeah,
how it works.
exactly. My kid takes over. He's worse because he was raised, at least I fought to get here.
There have been more egregious excuses and justifications given for participating in this event than Louis C.K.'s. But I feel like there was something uniquely embarrassing about the way he handled it. He's sheepish here, and it feels like he's walking on eggshells.
There's some good in it, maybe some bad in it, but I think for me it cuts towards going. And that's my decision.
This gives the impression that he knew what he was doing was wrong and didn't have the confidence in the justification he was putting forward, which makes it seem even more pathetic in my opinion. He's stuck on the fence, unable to openly express his reservations, but also unwilling to admit that he was just doing it for the money. So he has to come up with this garbled excuse about pushing Saudi Arabia in a more progressive direction.
There was a film festival there recently, like it's kind of opened up, but when I heard it's opening, I thought that's awfully interesting. That just feels like a good opportunity. The fact that that's opening up and starting to bud, I want to see it. I want to be part of it.
If we reverse the progress that country's made and we actually take it back, very possible, actually probable, if we give them license to treat the people even worse, who knows?
This marks him as something of a transitional figure in this list. Most of the comics I'll be talking about from here on have been pretty open about the fact that they did the event purely for the money, such as Pete Davidson. Chapter 5. Pete Davidson. I'm putting Pete at the beginning of this general segment because despite how wild it is that he agreed to do this gig, he really hasn't said anything especially weird or absurd. Davidson's involvement in the festival was controversial because, and this may come as a surprise to you because he never mentions it, his dad died in 9/11.
9/11.
This led people to ask how he could perform at an event created by, as Mark Maron put it,
You know, like from the folks that brought you 9/11, 2 weeks of laughter in the desert. Don't miss it.
Unlike many of the other comedians discussed in this documentary, Pete didn't try to come up with an excuse for his decision. On Theo Von's podcast, he basically said he just did it for the money.
I just, I get the routing and then I see the number and I go, I'll go.
While Davidson's decision to perform for the Saudis was pretty shameless, he also didn't go out of his way to talk about how he was just doing it for the money like some others we will get to. Everyone who took that money is guilty, but of all the people involved, Davidson weirdly comes out looking the least bad to me. He didn't claim he was trying to help progress the country with his words of mass discussion or whatever. He didn't even try to defend himself or try to spin his naked greed into some case about transparency. Really, the only comment he's made about taking part in the Riyadh Comedy Festival since was to joke on SNL that he took the money to pay for a Staten Island ferry boat that he purchased with Weekend Update host Colin Jost back in 2023.
So yeah, in case you're wondering why I had to do a show in Saudi Arabia, we're losing millions on this ferry.
More than anything else, his involvement in the festival just feels like a power move by the Saudis. Like, they're so powerful and influential that they can even get the comic whose dad famously died in 9/11. To quote Matt Christman, they're dabbing on us. To continue on with this theme of openly selling out to an authoritarian regime, we should talk about Tim Dillon. Chapter 6. Tim Dillon. Perhaps more than anyone else mentioned in this video, Tim was very vocal about the fact that he was doing the Saudi gig purely for the money. In an episode of his podcast from August 30th, Tim mocked the people who were upset about comedians taking part in the Riyadh Comedy Festival and told them to get over it because the House of Saud was paying comics millions of dollars.
Get over it. Get over it. We're going to Riyadh. The House of Saud is paying us hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of us millions, not me, but they're paying millions of dollars to comedians.
Dillon went on to specifically address the people saying that he was only doing it for the money by telling them how much he's going to make.
Doesn't matter how much they're paying me $375,000 for one show. Now, a lot of other people are getting $1.6 million. That's not me. I'm not in that bracket. But they're giving me $375,000.
Now, $375K for an hour of work is an absurd amount of money, don't misunderstand me, but it is by no means some grand, life-changing amount of money for someone like Tim, who is probably clearing high 6 figures to 7 figures a month. His Patreon alone was making about that much money the last time the figures were public, and that was years ago. Never mind the views on YouTube and the revenue from ad reads. My point is that while this amount of money is significant, it's probably only a fraction of his income. Tim seems like one of the most blatant and shameless grifters out there, so it's unsurprising to me that he would sell out in this manner, but it's still a relatively small amount of money to publicly sell out for. He does, however, make one interesting point in saying that there are comics who are making much less than him, and he doesn't understand why they're going.
They're giving me $375. Others are getting $150. Why are they doing it?
Despite Dillon's frankness on the issue, he still gives off big, trying to convince himself energy here.
We're taking the money. How about that? How about that? Sorry. Oh, you weren't invited? Oh, you got nothing going on? A lot of people are doing it, like a lot, like almost everyone. A lot of people are doing it.
He repeatedly says that even though he disagrees with the Saudis regarding their treatment of women and LGBTQ people, they're paying him enough to look the other way.
They bought comedy. So what? They're paying me enough money to look the other way. I'm being paid a lot of money to not care about what they do in their country.
He also makes the point that if somebody is paying him a lot of money, he's not going to go to their country and comment on it.
I will not comment on what's going on. In fact, I will ignore it. The more money you pay me, the less I'm going to think about it.
Ironically, the part that got Tim in trouble was the segment from this nearly 25-minute water carrying session where he was quote-unquote joking about the slaves in Saudi Arabia having it relatively good.
If I was a slave, I would love to make a beautiful hotel. If I was a slave and I had the chance to make a beautiful hotel, it would make me happy.
These comments in particular would come back to bite Tim, as he revealed on a September 20th episode of his podcast. According to Tim, his agent said that he had already angered the Saudis by saying that he was going to perform in Abu Dhabi.
My agent called me and he goes, you said on Joe Rogan that you were performing in Abu Dhabi and you're actually performing in Dubai. They're cities and they have a rivalry. And I go, dude, who gives a fuck? What do I stop?
However, Tim talking about the slaves was the straw that broke the camel's back, and he was fired from the festival as a result.
But he called me and he said, they heard what you said about them having slaves. And I said, I was being positive about it. I was defending them.
Some people have suggested that this was all a bit by Tim and that he was never part of the festival lineup, but I don't buy that. I mean, for one thing, he was apparently trying to sell tickets to this, and if he really was doing that, it would probably be considered fraud or something. I don't think he would fuck around with that so blatantly. In my opinion, it was just a revealing look into what the true intentions behind the festival were. It was pure propaganda. Even when they had someone as obsequious as Tim, who was willing to throw away any hint of morality for a paycheck, that still wasn't good enough. Because he was willing to acknowledge the reality of the situation.
I addressed it in a funny way, and they fired me.
What the Saudis wanted out of a performer was someone who would have zero critical things to say about the country whatsoever. Someone who wouldn't acknowledge the truth, even in their own defense. In fact, it was something literally written into those free speech restrictions that Bill Maher thought were so insignificant. You can't criticize the country.
Hey, I've never been this nervous. They gave me a list of what to say, what not to say. And they said, don't talk about gay, don't talk about the government, don't talk about their religion.
The funny thing is, Tim Dillon wasn't even the only comic to get preemptively fired for discussing the dark truths about Saudi Arabia. The same thing happened to admitted date rapist Jim Jefferies. Chapter 7. Jim Jefferies. I'll admit that when I first heard about this whole fiasco, Jim Jefferies was one of the names that really stuck out to me. Not because I was under the impression that he had more integrity than this. If you've followed my channel from the beginning, you'll know that I've documented Jim's spineless political shapeshifting for years. He's someone who changes his views based on whatever's in vogue at the time. When being an edgy atheist was cool, he did that. When being a normie shitlib was popular, he started doing gun control material and pretended to be a Me Too feminist.
Then came the day when a large part of America was willing to write off pussy grabbing as locker room talk, and I started to rethink that.
Despite a decade plus of jokes disparaging women.
Do you want to know who makes me come? I make me come! You have very little to do with it. You're just the container I shoot it into.
As well as publicly admitting to plying a teenager with drugs for sex.
And I fucked her when she was 17 and bragged. I plied her full of drugs.
So the idea that he would acquiesce to the wishes of an authoritarian regime in exchange for a paycheck was not surprising. Honestly, he was probably just excited to go to a country whose initials are SA. No, what surprised me is that arguably more than anybody else on this lineup, Jim has told a shitload of jokes about Islam.
You see this microphone? I'm calling it Muhammad. It's a gay microphone called Muhammad, and all it wants to do is roll the Quran up and f*** itself up the ass.
So Muhammad is considered the perfect man?
Right, yes.
Okay.
You can't draw a picture of it.
No, don't you dare, don't you dare. I've got enough death threats on me, brother.
There he is.
Jesus Christ.
There he is. He looks like a wobbly ghost.
But the more I've thought about it, the more I think that's exactly why they chose him. When he did Theo Von's podcast in August, Jim accidentally hit on this point like it was a girl over 18.
Basically, we are freedom of speech machines being sent over there. And let's be fair, they have picked some fucking edgy-ass comedians.
The thing is, he's sort of right, but for the wrong reasons. The comedians who were invited to Riyadh weren't freedom of speech machines, but that is the image they've been cultivating for years. The idea that stand-up comics are the last bastion of free speech, that their boundary-pushing remarks and witticisms are the only thing standing between us and censorship. If the Saudis could get these free speech warriors to come to Riyadh, it would convince a lot of people that the country was not as repressive as they thought. The funny thing is, it clearly didn't take much convincing. They even got a useful idiot like Dave Chappelle to claim that it's easier to talk in Saudi Arabia than it is in America. Really, all they had to do was play to the egos of pseudo-intellectuals like CK, Jefferies, and Chappelle by telling them that they would be breaking new ground and starting the conversation or whatever, and those comics ate it up like hogs at a trough. You can see it in the way someone like Jim was so eager to latch onto the idea that it's important to open up a dialogue with the Saudis rather than isolating them.
And us isolating them teaches us nothing and teaches them nothing.
Yeah.
Interestingly, this was very similar to a statement made by Aziz Ansari during his Kimmel interview.
And to push a dialogue, and you kind of have to make a choice of whether you're going to isolate or engage. And
ironically, though, free speech would ultimately be Jim's undoing. During the same podcast with Theo Von, he would address some of Saudi Arabia's human rights abuses, specifically the recent execution of journalist Turki Al-Jasser, which Jim would say was not a hill he was willing to die on.
How dare you go over there after they killed a reporter. One reporter was killed by the government. Unfortunate, but not a hill that I'm going to die on.
Much like with Tim Dillon, this basic level of acknowledgement of reality was a step too far, and Jim was removed from the festival. Since this event went down, I've seen people occasionally making the case that comics like Jim, Tim, and Pete deserve some credit for their transparency. I think the fact that they were so conscious of the gravity of the situation and were still willing to take part in this festival makes it even worse. They freely admitted that they were willing to look the other way in exchange for a paycheck, and that's completely despicable. But things can get even worse. Let's take a look at the case of Dave Chappelle. Chapter 8. Dave Chappelle. As with Jim Jefferies, I wasn't really surprised that Dave Chappelle was willing to take the Saudi gig. Honestly, he was probably just happy to be in a country that shared his views on the LGBTQ community. More to the point, for the past few years, Dave has seemingly been on a weird path to undermine the legacy he built as one of comedy's greats. It would be easy to view the Riyadh Comedy Festival as just another leg of that journey, but I think it's more significant than that. As I said a while ago, Chappelle quipped during his set that it's easier to talk in Saudi Arabia than it is in America. He tied that idea to people in America being canceled for talking about Charlie Kirk. Now, the Charlie Kirk situation is a whole can of worms that I'm not going to open in this video, but even if you factor in the people who were canceled for talking about him, including Jimmy Kimmel, Dave would still be talking out of his ass. He was making this point during a set where he was contractually prohibited from talking about the Saudi leadership or religion in general. And even with those restrictions in place, he was still extremely privileged by the standard of the average Saudi citizen. To suggest that it's easier to speak over there than it would be in America is actually so absurd that it seems like Dave is just disconnected from reality. It's sort of sad. Or at least it would be if Dave wasn't getting paid God knows how much money to say this kind of idiotic shit. What is actually kind of sad, though, is that Dave seems to have lost whatever was left of his moral compass that he hasn't thrown away in recent years. I started off this video by saying that most comedians are completely shameless grifters, but you could make the case that, at one point, Dave Chappelle was different. He was somebody who would stand by his principles, even if it meant walking away from tens of millions of dollars. But what does Dave stand for now? This man has talked about the evils of slavery in his act numerous times. He had the gall to compare his experience with Comedy Central to being a slave.
When I quit the show, all my friends would say, well, fuck them, Dave. Why don't you just do Chappelle's show at another network? Yeah. And why doesn't a slave run from one plantation to another plantation? Because the master over there might be nicer.
Yet now he's perfectly happy to take money from the government of a country where human trafficking and forced labor are commonplace. You can't even argue that he stands for free speech anymore because he was willing to sacrifice that for a certain amount of money. He was okay with working at the behest of a government that oppresses its people and silences its critics, many of whom are comedians like Dave. Unlike Dave, though, they don't get to experience the relaxed free speech restrictions that he did. They don't get to hop on a jet and fly home either. They have to live with the looming threat that something they say might land them in prison, or worse. That's why Dave's dim-witted opinion that it's easier to speak in Riyadh than it is in America is so detached from reality. Maybe you specifically had an easier time talking about your political hobby horses in Saudi Arabia than America, but this is an exception. Beyond that, Dave had to take part in the weird photo ops and ball washing of Saudi Arabia that it seems they all had to. This is a guy who nearly 20 years ago was talking about how black actors were put through humiliation rituals by Hollywood and made to wear dresses.
Like when I connect dots that maybe shouldn't be connected, I don't know. But certain dots, like when I see that they put every black man in the movies in a dress at some point in their career, I'll be connecting them down like, wow, all these brothers gotta wear a dress. That's happened to me.
Now he's getting buck broken by the Saudis and forced to do whatever this sand handprint shit is. Even if we don't know exactly how much it costs to buy Dave's integrity, there is now a definitive price tag on it. And at some point, somebody else is going to make him another offer.
He said, but name your price in the beginning. If it ever gets more expensive than the price he named, get out of there.
Maybe he'll get his version of Medea or Big Mama's house. I mean, look in this man's eyes and tell me that for the right amount of money, he wouldn't put the fucking dress on now. He's lost all credibility. Although Dave Chappelle may not have said much about the Riyadh Comedy Festival, his participation in the event speaks volumes. And in my opinion, it's the final nail in the coffin of his fall from grace. As bad as the comedians discussed so far have been, a few have gone above and beyond to embarrass themselves. They didn't just make poor excuses or shamelessly admit that they were being paid to look the other way. They have actually been attacking the critics of their participation in the event, including their own fans. In my opinion, their behavior was so egregious that it warranted making a separate video just to spotlight them, which is why this will be a two-parter. Also, it might give them more time to say more crazy shit that I can include in that video. So, I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you in part 2. As always, I want to thank you for watching the video or listening to the audio version, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. And a special thank you to my supporters on Patreon who help make these videos possible. Thank you, Squirt, Rusty Shackelford, Jackson, Fightback CBD, Mike Roballs, Izzy's Beans, Mad Maxburger, Gaius Anisha Patton, Scott Richmond, Mad Nexus, Josh, Random Candor, Fuzzy Yannis, Old Neon, Timothy Lee Peterson, Wet Cigarette, Firebrand, Quasi, Snepsts, Alex, and Neem.